Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Deferrals. I'm Matt Higgins. And we have our very first ever podcast guest, MLB reporter for USA Today, Gabe Lacques. Thank you so much, Gabe, for joining us. And how are you doing today?
This is an honor beyond description. I feel like I should get maybe like a robe with a little monogrammed crest or something for this honor. It's
we might have to.
Exciting.
Yeah, we might have to send you maybe a little gold star or something, or a little trophy you can put behind you on your shelf. So let's kick it off. Let's start off with the New York Yankees. They've been bit by the injury bug a little bit this spring. Giancarlo Stanton and his 27 home runs, they're starting the season on the injured list because he has tennis elbow in both elbows. Reigning AL Rookie of the Year winner, Luis Gil, he's going to be most likely out until June with a right lat strain in his pitching shoulder. Another starter, and Clarke Schmidt, he's currently dealing with a stiff back. So that's 40% of the rotation now in flux. And on top of that, DJ LeMahieu, who's been off injured for the Yankees the past couple seasons, he's now dealing with a left calf muscle injury, and he was supposed to be one of the favorites to take over at third base when the Yankees were going to be moving Jazz Chisholm Jr. over to second. So my question for you, Gabe, how are the Yankees going to be able to offset these injuries, and do you think there will be any signings or trades in the coming days? Cough, cough, Nolan Arenado.
Well, I think you have to look, and I don't mean to be so Pollyanna-ish about it, but I think you have to, if you're a Yankee fan, take these injuries in something of a positive light, which sounds crazy. But at the same time, we get so obsessed with opening day roster and the projected this and that, and who are the five in the rotation and who's the lineup going to be, forgetting conveniently that stuff changes almost constantly over the course of a 162 game season. So, if it was June 5th and Clarke Schmidt had a barking back, he missed a couple starts, you probably wouldn't even notice it to that extent. But, with Luis Gil, it's interesting because the guy had a huge leap in innings pitched last year. Yeah. And it's not to say that they need to manage him necessarily, because he's probably, under the theory, he might be due for more of a leap this year too, just the way those things go. But probably not the worst thing for him to cool his heels for a couple months. Now, those lat situations are very tricky. We've seen the likes of Justin Verlander, Grayson Rodriguez, guys like that have to deal with it over the years. It's definitely like a multiple months kind of thing. And, you hope that if things go smoothly, it will just be a couple of months. So the good news is that Marcus Stroman, obviously he came to camp a little bit unhappy. Well, he's going to have a slot in that rotation. And he tends to do better in the first half. He's kind of, the pitcher that he is now, he can still theoretically get you to 190 or so innings. They won't need that from him, but he's tended to hit the wall a little bit in September. So when you look at what the Yankees need over the course of 162 games, what Stroman can give them out of the chute for, say, 10 to 15 starts, that might not be too bad. So that kind of works out all right for them. And there are a preponderance of off days in the early part of the season, so you may not need five guys all of the time. The interesting thing, I think, is the position player side, which Stanton, that's a little bit of a problem, just because you're losing some stock from the lineup that you were really kind of counting on. He had a really, really good year last year, maybe not a consistent and not totally healthy for the entire stretch, but one of his better years in a long time, and really augmented and backed up the Soto Judge tandem really nicely. Now suddenly there's a big gap there, and you're having these new lineup pieces that you were hoping that would be more additive. Suddenly you're leaning on them for a little more production. You're hoping to hide, Paul Goldschmidt down there in the 6 hole, and maybe, or wherever he might have been, and maybe not have to lean on him so much with the player that he is right now. All those guys get bumped up a little bit, so that's a little bit of a problem. And it's a really interesting injury. The elbows, both elbows, the torque with his swing, all that kind of stuff, really unusual. So it's that is kind of a bigger long-term concern if he's not back relatively shortly after opening day. That's a bummer for them. And then the third base situation, that's kind of been, if there's something that like made Brian Cashman kind of like pull the covers over his head and sleep 10 more minutes all winter, it was probably third base, because there was never really a good fix. Bregman probably going to be too expensive for what they think their payroll should be. And in retrospect, like, okay, paying him $40 million a year probably wasn't in their budget, wasn't in their best interest necessarily, in addition to losing a draft pick and all that kind of stuff. So not to say that the Yankees at $308 million couldn't afford $350 million with their payroll this year. But you take that off the board. Nolan Arenado, I mean, the Cardinals kind of want it both ways with regard to paying the contract down, and then maybe, the team assuming the contract, paying some of it down and giving up prospects for him. They seem resigned to keeping him. So, and again, that's a contract you may not want on the books longer than this year. Let's just say Cody Bellinger has a suboptimal year. Maybe he gets hurt. Maybe he's not doing so well. Opts into the last year of his contract. Yeah. Arenado continues to decline. Suddenly you have two pieces on your 2026 roster that A, make a lot of money, and B, may not add much to your team. Now that's a worst case scenario. I think Bellinger is going to be all right, but you don't want to lock yourself into too many. You don't want to chase bad with bad, because we kind of knew the last couple of years of LeMahieu's deal weren't going to be great. Do you really want to stack an Arenado on top of that? That's probably not in their best interest. So, you roll out with Oswaldo Cabrera. You maybe get Peraza sometime in there. See if LeMahieu. Caps are interesting. And that's been a problem for him over the years. So you can't count on him for much, but even for these big market teams, at some spots you just kind of got to bite the bullet, and I think that's kind of what they're hoping to do, and see what's around at the trade deadline theoretically. And I know that's not what Yankee fans want to hear, but I just don't think there is much out there other than scrape the bottom of somebody else's roster at the end of spring training. That's always a possibility. A guy like Paul DeYoung, who just signed with the Nationals, that's kind of a move that maybe you could anticipate the Yankees making, but I don't think they have a blockbuster in them for a lot of reasons.
Staying in the AL East, the baseball world's kind of wondering what the Toronto Blue Jays are going to be doing, since both Vladimir Guerrero and Bo Bichette, just two faces of the franchise, that's all. They're both going to be free agents after the season. Obviously, Toronto wasn't able to come to an extension with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Sounds like they were far apart in numbers about the contract. And it also seems like, according to Bo Bichette, that the Blue Jays never even initiated talks with him over the offseason. What does the future hold for these two in Toronto? And do you think they will be gone by the trade deadline?
Yeah, I mean, if there's one team where it's an imperative to get off to a strong start, it's probably the Blue Jays for that reason. You need to show management that it's worth keeping this group together. It's still a really good team. They've just really hit some offensive valleys last year early in the season with Bichette and Springer, and then Vlad for a while, and then he got hot. He had one of the better. He was kind of in tandem with Aaron Judge. The last 4 or 5 months of the season really hot after a rough start. That killed him last year. They can't really have that this year, because then suddenly, the trade deadline vultures are going to start circling a little bit. Talk of the window closing and all that stuff. But I talked a little bit with Bo Bichette a couple weeks ago, and I think he's he's got things pretty well in perspective. He knows this is a prove-it year for him. He probably wouldn't expect, I think both sides probably knew this wasn't a time to try to extend him, because he thinks he's better than he was last year. The Jays think he's better than he was last year. They know he knows that. So, why try to swoop in and get him on the cheap when his value is at its lowest? Both parties want him to do great this year, and so I think he will certainly hit the market. Did Vlad leave the door open a little bit for something to happen in the regular season? Maybe, but he's getting so close now to free agency, and it's like you said, 29 more teams ready to get into it come the winter, and that's going to be really challenging for the Jays. But I don't think they're looking to sell right now, and I don't think they would look to sell if they're playing a little bit above 500 at the trade deadline and in that mix. They still have a really good pitching staff. We'll see what, Max Scherzer has looked all right so far this spring. And it's going to be interesting to see, if that can still be a pitching-centric team and if they'll hit enough to support that. So I don't anticipate them being the aggressors immediately, but that first April-May portion of the season going to be really crucial, especially because if you do think, well, heck, we got to trade Vladdy, better to do it sooner and get more value for him, say in a late June, early July kind of thing, than waiting for that deadline clock to tick down. So, probably the team to watch for April and May in terms of how they come out of the gate.
Yeah, it definitely seems like the Blue Jays kind of missed the boat on the whole Vladimir Guerrero, Bo Bichette situation. Especially, they could have gotten, I feel, the Blue Jays could have gotten like a Juan Soto type of package that the Nationals got from the San Diego Padres if Vlad got traded last year during the deadline.
Right. Maybe somewhere between what the Padres got and what the Nationals got for Juan Soto. It's kind of staggering to think the talent that Soto has been traded for now. When you look at those two packages, Washington to San Diego to New York. It's he loves it there. They love him there. If you're not going to trade him, you have to be able to extend him. And Vlad is not a Boris guy, not that there's anything wrong with that, but he's not a guy totally hell-bent on going to the market, so you got to be a little bit irrational. And I think their brass kind of stuck a little too closely to what they consider value and shared risk and all that kind of stuff. Vlad's a different guy, and you may not have a guy in your organization like that for a really long time. So, it's very unfortunate for them they weren't able to get that done.
Now, moving toward the National League East, talking about my Philadelphia Phillies, born and bred diehard fan. You covered the Phillies a few days ago in a piece for the USA Today. It was kind of a little frustrating offseason for us fans because, as you know, their offense can disappear in very, very critical times, as we saw in the NLDS last year. They can disappear for multiple games, as they did last season. And then we also saw at the end of the 2023 NLCS in Game 6 and 7 when their offense fell flat. All they did to improve the offense this season was sign a left-handed hitting outfielder, Max Kepler, who hit 8 home runs for the Minnesota Twins. So the Phillies are obviously hoping for a bounce-back season for him. On top of that, you have Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto, who will be free agents after this season. And as much as fans want this lineup to change, there's really nobody that can replace Realmuto out on the free agent market, especially after the Phillies dealt away Logan O'Hoppe for Brandon Marsh a few off seasons ago. And with the way Schwarber has become one of the best home run hitters in the game today and a clubhouse leader, do the Phillies really want to let him go after this season as well? They do have prospects in the pipeline. They got Andrew Painter, most likely making his MLB debut around July-ish or so. You also got Justin Crawford and Aiden Miller, most likely making their debuts next year for the Phillies. So I guess my big question is, how do you see the Phillies faring this season? And where do you see extension talks for Schwarber and Realmuto going? And do you think both will be back in Philadelphia for next season and a couple more years to come?
Yeah, I think they're going to do really well this year. I think they're going to win the NL East. I do. I think they have the best pitching staff, 1 to 5, of what we'll call the big three there. It's maybe the most pivotal guy in the division is Chris Sale. Because I think there's this feeling of and they got Chris Sale. Hey, if he can repeat last year or even be 75% of what he was last year, great. But here's add another year to the odometer, and if he can stay healthy and back up last year with a year like that, that definitely changes the equation for the Braves. But I do like the pitching. The pickup of Luzardo was really nice to kind of lessen the reliance on the Sanchez's and Suarez's of the world to a degree. Zach Wheeler arguably could have won the Cy Young Award last year. So
Twice.
I think 1 through 26, I think they're the best team in the division. Now, if everybody on the Braves levels up and like back to their production levels they anticipated last year, that too could be a problem. So I like them to win the division, and I think it makes sense for both of those guys to come back, kind of on both ends. They're both in that, early 30s to creeping toward the mid 30s kind of period of their career where, they're not quite ready for the gold watch contract. They're not quite ready for the Clayton Kershaw situation. At the same time, how veteran players are treated on the market these days. So it's a little cold out there for them. So Real Muto, a guy coming off a 5-year, $115 million extension, you could certainly build in a deal with him that's maybe a 2-year guarantee, maybe a 3-year guarantee, maybe some mutual options, maybe some opt-outs, whatever the case may be. He says he feels healthy. He says that, his meniscus, kind of that was sort of glossed over last year, but that kind of took his legs away from him during a key part of the season last year. Schwarber's a little more interesting because he's a guy who could fit on a lot of different teams with regard to just that elite on-base percentage and elite power. It's not 2019 anymore. Logan Morrison isn't hitting 36 home runs. You can't just give a veteran 1 year, $1 million, and he's going to hit 30 to 40 bombs. So Schwarber's different now. He's a really big presence in that lineup, and again, he likes it there. He appreciates the fact they're always wanting to win in Philadelphia. It's always interesting the taste that certain things leave in people's mouths. When the Cubs non-tendered him, I think it was really kind of a jolt to him way back in 2021 or 2022, just because here's a guy that seemed to be a foundational piece of that team, and a team that seemed to want to win, and suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, you're gonna set me loose to save $9-10 million, and then to go to the playoffs with the Red Sox, and then come to a team like the Phillies, where it always seems like there's a little more in the seat cushions to add. Suddenly that's a great position to be in. So I think it makes sense for all the parties involved, Schwarber, Real Muto, and the Phillies themselves, to kind of keep that going with not too much. I think the Phillies can get those guys back and not be liable for too much, not be on the hook for some really grim decline years, while at the same time treating those guys with the respect they deserve, and certainly what they might fetch on the open market. So the bigger reset may come after next season. I think a guy like Nick Castellanos comes off the books. Valued player, really good postseason performer at times, but for fans that are frustrated with sort of the tendency for the offense to disappear, that might be a spot where you might be able to upgrade a little bit with maybe a more predictive player over the course of 162 games, that kind of thing. But this year, running it back with this group, I think they're gonna do really well for sure.
And now, staying in the NL East, we're going to talk about kind of the Phillies' biggest rival, New York Mets. Now, obviously, they had a fantastic offseason. Signed Juan Soto to the record-breaking contract, brought back their homegrown star and Pete Alonso. But they do have some big concerns on the pitching front. Sean Manaea, who pitched really well for them last year, and they brought back on a 3-year, $75 million deal. He is out right now with a strained right oblique. Will be out for opening day. And then free agent acquisition, Frankie Montas, he won't be back until like May or June with a high-grade lat strain in his pitching shoulder. How do you see this affecting the Mets, and who will step in for them until they get back and healthy?
Yeah, they're significant problems, to be sure. And I think the biggest takeaway for me about the thinning of the rotation core, the way that it's happened in New York, is their question marks can't be question marks anymore. Which is to say that when you look at Senga coming back, from a shoulder injury and came back just for a brief taste last year, that looked really impressive. He's hitting 98 in camp, all that kind of stuff. All those sort of external factors are looking very good for him. And then you look at Clay Holmes stretching back out to be a starter, which he was earlier in his career. Those were two question marks coming into this season. Can Senga be healthy for 25, 30 starts? Can Holmes make that transition? And, while knowing too that he's probably not going to be at best more than a 5-inning guy for at least the outset of the season, so it's, those guys got to be ready. They got to be, and they have to be pitching really well right out of the chute. You could maybe, afford a few hiccups, little setbacks here and there with those guys. Not now, because, you're looking at Paul Blackburn and Griffin Canning, who the Angels of all teams non-tendered, a team that's, and this is when pitching injuries in a greater sense become, hit even harder, because you got Christian Scott, top prospect. He's down with Tommy John. Maybe that was a guy you could have slotted in there at some point, Brandon Sproat now suddenly becomes a guy that a guy you look to hope to kind of fill in as a young player, and then you're not I'll say dumpster diving, but you're grabbing Jose Urena off the free agent scrap heap middle of spring training there. He's probably going to figure in early. Also not a guy you can count on for, he's sort of a classic burst guy. Like if you get 5 to 7 decent starts or whatever out of him, okay, but it's certainly not a long-term solution. So yeah, it's a problem. And, can they bash their way, to success when it's a Griffin Canning day, let's say? Possibly. I mean, it's my gosh, any lineup with Juan Soto always has a chance. Very deep lineup now. And again, you talk about like backing up another good year with a good one. Mark Vientos, really a fascinating guy to watch this year. So good last year, so clutch in the playoffs. Is that his normal? Is this the start of a step ladder to becoming a superstar? Or does he have a little bit of a regression kind of thing in his first full year? That's always not to say that he's not going to do well, but sometimes these things aren't always linear. So maybe he'll come back a little bit and then next year become the guy he is for good. But he's a really fascinating guy to see just how much better he gets, and if he just simply replicates the production that he provided for them from pretty much June through the NLCS last season.
It surprised me that the Mets initially went with Brett Baty at third base over Mark Vientos. It's just from the eye test, it always seemed that Vientos was better at the plate at least than Baty. Maybe obviously not fielding wise, but at the plate. But they went with Baty over Vientos at first.
Yeah, and I think that might have been one of those situations where they knew that and they liked Vientos better for the long term, and sort of like, okay, we're going to look at Brett as as not a stopgap necessarily, but okay, come up here, take your lumps at the big leagues. We really want to get Vientos to work in earnest on his defense down at AAA, and see more pitching and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes you don't want your best guy you don't want to commit to your best guy until he's a fully finished product. So I think their priority might have been getting Vientos to that stage, and then when he was ready to be turned loose, not quite the halfway point of last year, that's when they said, go get him, kid, and he really came through with flying colors on that one.
And regarding the Mets, it just feels like, obviously, they're a very hot pick this year, but I feel like a lot of people forget, like, it took them 161 games,
right,
to clinch a playoff spot. Their rotation still isn't, all that great shakes right now.
Right.
And I'm not saying this because I'm a huge Phillies fan and despise the Mets.
Maybe a smidge.
Maybe a smidge, a little bit, But I think they're gonna, unless they go out and get like a guy like Dylan Cease, I think they're gonna have issues on the pitching front. That could really cost them. If they're trying to make that big postseason push.
Right, and it's a long season, so maybe you may not have even touched touched how bad it's going to get, conceivably. And again, they have a nice bullpen. It's deep enough, I think. Again, but bullpen performance is so volatile. It's and they're probably going to have to lean on those guys a lot early in the season. So maybe they it could be going great guns for a while, and then suddenly the Ryan Staneks of the world, the Butos, the Reed Garretts, maybe their odometers are blinking red a little too early in the season because they had to backfill so much early in the year. So yeah, it's all the parts have to kind of fire together over the course of 6-7 months to make that happen. So it'll be interesting to see if they can pull it off, and certainly a interesting challenge for Carlos in the manager's seat, just because second year back, trying to prove, kind of back up what was a really great first year for him, with the added pressure and scrutiny of a $765 million man on his roster. That just doesn't matter how much they're paying Juan Soto if half the pitching staff is on the shelf. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways that can go up there. So you are right to be intrigued, shall we say?
Now, speaking of the $765 million man, the Mets and Dodgers are obviously like the biggest offseason winners. Were there any other teams that surprised you with the offseason moves they made, or like teams that lack thereof, let's say, of moves?
Yeah, I think my biggest quote unquote winner, you might say, might be the Red Sox, just because to me the most important acquisition, best value acquisition, all of that this winter was going to be Garrett Crochet, and probably the biggest potential difference maker. And he would have been a bigger difference maker if he was on a more ready-made, playoff proven team, or team that's gone to the playoffs recently. Like if he had gone to the Orioles, say, that would have been huge. That would have been backfilling for Corbin Burns, and you have this nucleus ready to go. You've answered almost all the questions about your young players, and then it's like, oh gosh, I think that would have made the Orioles the favorites in the East. Going to the Red Sox, it's really interesting when you look at just the A to Z of their offseason. Start with Crochet and end with Bregman, with Walker Buehler mixed in there, or Aroldis Chapman. I think the Red Sox have probably, exasperated the industry more than any other team in the last 5 years, just with their lack of aggression in spring training or in free agency, and just willingness to kind of, not go too deep into trying to contend while everybody else kind of pass them up. And I think what happens is, and I've written about this a few times, you suddenly become less of a destination for teams because there's so much made about the Dodgers. Oh, the Dodgers this, Dodgers that, bad for baseball, $1 billion offseason, et cetera. Well, okay, Yamamoto could have gone any number of places. Could have gone to the Yankees. Yankees had, I think, the same deal on the table for him. Could have gone to the Red Sox.
The Phillies offered him the most money, apparently.
There you go. Yes, and things just looked pretty good in LA. And then Sasaki, very much a courtesy interview with the Red Sox. The Sasaki, definitely the rich getting richer. This was the last team that needed a value add like Sasaki on a minimum wage contract. But if you're Roki Sasaki and you've only pitched 130 innings as a season high, and you're going in with all this scrutiny and all that, would you rather, let's take a more realistic option. Would you rather be the number 3 starter in San Diego, where they're going to hand you the ball and say, look, we need you for 25, 30 starts. We need you for 150 to 180 innings. Or would you rather go to LA, where they have a really great pitching program, where they have 9 starters?
Yeah.
Check the pockets here, maybe another one tumbled out, that guy's going to have a really great soft landing into Major League Baseball, as did Yamamoto last year, who, and he missed a couple of months and then was a postseason hero, so that worked out well for him. The Red Sox used to be that team, or at least one of those teams, right? Like they always, Yankees, Red Sox, the two evil empires back in the 2000s, and then they developed some really great teams to win 4 titles this century. Suddenly they're last on the list of places that people would want to go. So you have to kind of reestablish that beachhead, right? And I think by the end of the postseason, or by the end of the offseason, Bregman looked at it, and of course the $40 million guarantee didn't hurt, but looked at it and was like, hey, this is a place I can go and flourish and maybe stay long term. Turn down a lot more guaranteed money with Detroit, even with Houston, although that wasn't the deal that he wanted structurally. Yeah. But you have to make yourself a destination, and I think that might have been the biggest thing this offseason was the Red Sox are back in business, and it looks like they care again because for a while there it looked to they looked to be a little delinquent in their duty in producing a team that Red Sox fans and baseball fans really have come to expect for the last 25 plus years.
Well, especially after that Mookie Betts blunder too. I mean, just trading him away.
Such a line of demarcation.
Superstar, yeah. And I think I think one player left on the Red Sox
from that trade.
Connor Wong,
yes,
yeah,
right.
That's the only player left.
And they got a few decent years out of Verdugo, but at the same time, it's like you could pretty much immediately see that deal and be like, okay, none of these guys are going to carry this deal. No. And additionally, they wanted to salary dump David Price's deal too, so they got a lesser package in return. So really just, that certainly, they've rallied from it. And, to give the departed Chaim Bloom a little bit of credit, like, hey, he did leave that, that minor league cupboard stuffed with a lot of really good guys. And one of them that got turned into Garrett Crochet. So it's interesting, but you got to need to do both if you're the Red Sox, and it's good to see them back doing things like that.
Yeah. And speaking of the Red Sox, over the weekend you put out your first MLB power ranking list. You obviously had the Dodgers at the top, but you kind of had a little bit of surprise. You had the Arizona Diamondbacks in your top 5. Kind of like a 2-part question here. One, will anybody be able to dethrone the Avengers Assemble Dodgers this season? And what made you put the Diamondbacks so high, especially after they missed out on the playoffs last year?
Right. Well, it's crazy. In fact, as I was formulating this half-baked thought in my brain that made me put them number 4, I had to double check it. They won 83 games the year they went to the World Series.
Yeah.
They won 89 games the year they missed the playoffs. It's crazy, right? It just goes to show you the randomness and the, you simulate the season 1,000 times and, it spits out what it spits out, So not a bad team last year. Same record, I think, as the Mets and or Braves. I can't remember exactly, but they're right there with those guys. So the whole like missing the playoffs thing is a little like, okay, that's not exactly like a black mark on their record, although they did stagger that at the end. They could have wrapped that thing up and put the Mets out of their misery. They didn't. But you add you add Corbin Burns to that mix. My goodness, it's the 2 biggest factors there. You add Burns and you potentially get back freshman year Corbin Carroll.
Yeah.
Because he was so bad for I think he ended up hitting 231, really first 75 games of the season.
Yeah, he was in a big slump.
Yes. And so suddenly, maybe he's, I don't think his rookie year is going to be his apex. Maybe that's a bit of an outlier year for him, but he's certainly not as bad as he was last year. And so we tend to, like follow the charts like this. He's a much better player, much better hitter than that. So it's, that's theoretically like getting back a star caliber player if he returns at all to his 2023 form. And then you bring that pitching in and, again, you don't want to make assumptions will Eduardo Rodriguez stay healthy, for the 25-30 starts they need? That would be helpful. But, you start with that Burns, Gallen, Merrill Kelly kind of situation. Still have Jordan Montgomery kind of floating in the breeze somewhere. Who knows what's going to happen with that. But a really deep team and a really tested team. And, it's funny, like Torey Lovello, they stuck with him after some really dark years, after some 110 loss kind of years, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes he can come off as a little too, Stuart Smalley with regard to like positive reinforcement and all that kind of stuff. But, it's, he's been through it and I think they believe in him. And, to get to your other question, can they challenge the Dodgers? They can. There's a scenario where they win the division, but it would probably require, a significant amount of attrition with the Dodgers, because as we know, they can afford to lose 2, 3, 4 pitchers and probably be okay.
Yeah.
If you
I mean, it happened last year. They won the World Series with 3
right,
starters.
yes, they won the World Series with Ben Kasparius starting Game 4. Gosh, that worked out well. And I remember asking Dave Roberts, like, in so many words, are you really, really throwing this game away? Like I would, and they took they did a really good job looking at the total postseason pitching picture, if you will, and okay, we're going to stay away from our A guys. This is a B game basically, and sometimes they win those B games because they score 10 runs. But that being said, the Dodgers are so deep, it is hard to imagine a scenario where they lose that much to leave the door open that much. Because I think best case scenario, the Diamondbacks win 93, 94 games. Like if all of
that's a good number.
Yeah, if all of that goes correctly, and that's, the Dodgers. I think they're 103. They're saying in Vegas for their their win total. Hard not to imagine the Dodgers winning less than 95. So it's a true puncher's chance for the Diamondbacks to win the division. But at the same time, getting that home first round 2-game situation isn't too bad either. So it's certainly something to shoot for. And they do have, there's so few punching bags. They have a pretty good punching bag in the Rockies. The East teams will be able to, Washington, Miami,
I think Washington can be sneaky good.
They can be sneaky good.
They can be sneaky good.
They should be like, in another thing we did a few weeks ago was the win totals, and I was kind of like, doping out the 2,430 games and how they were going to land. And going into that exercise, in my mind, I was thinking the Nationals around 77 to 79 wins, and I think they're that decent of a team to be right there.
Yeah.
But then you get down to it, and if it's going to be this big 3 in the East, the Nationals might slide down to I think it's been 72 wins the last 2 years, but they're probably going to end up right around 74, 75 instead of the upper 70s, which doesn't say they're not a good team. They're going to be better, but they're in a really tough division. So it's it will be interesting to see who wipes the floor with with the bottom feeders, and maybe with the schedule not as unbalanced as it used to be. There's not as many injustices that way, but who's going to beat up on the Rockies? Who's going to beat up on the Marlins? Yeah,
exactly. 100%. So is the Dodgers your favorite team to win the World Series this year?
Yes. Yeah. It kind of has to be, especially because they, to paraphrase Kike Hernandez's post-game F-bomb during the playoffs. Like, that's another big piece to all this, is they truly are impervious to all this now, which isn't to say that like they had a monkey on their back in all those years of playoff pratfalls, which really was a couple of eras, kind of the pre-2020 era, and then 21, 22, 23, just like the overthinking in taking guys out after 5 innings, whatever, that really killed them. They were, totally toast in 23 thanks to the pitching injuries, and the Diamondbacks really kind of waylaid them. But I think you got to make the Dodgers the favorite. If you're a betting person, I think there's a lot of really good value way down the line. Like with regard, because like I think the Braves were like the number 3 choice. I don't know about that. Sure, they're a great team, but like, do the Detroit Tigers have the exact same chance as the Atlanta Braves of winning the World Series? I kind of think that might be the case. I mean, it's as silly as that might sound. It's interesting. There's the Dodgers and everyone else, and then within that everyone else, there's a lot of interesting things that can happen. Surprising things that can happen, especially when you get to the postseason.
Yeah, especially as we saw with my Phillies last year, losing in 4 games to the Mets.
Yes,
brutal. And we'll get out with you on this question. I'm actually going to focus more on the kind of on the business side of baseball. We just talked about the Washington Nationals, but now they are free to pursue their own TV rights beginning with the 2026 season after settling a dispute with the Baltimore Orioles regarding the Mid-Atlantic Sports Network. Kind of from like your perspective, what does this mean for the Nationals with their TV rights hitting the open market, and how will this affect their future payroll?
Yeah, definitely a good news, bad news situation. Good news, they're free of an onerous deal that, both stifled their revenue and, didn't really allow them the creative sort of flexibility to sort of have their own TV product. They were always under the thumb of the Orioles. And to the Orioles' defense, and they, like in the early days of this deal with Peter Angelos, it certainly seemed like they kind of wielded an iron fist in this relationship. But you can see where they were coming from with regard to, the Nationals exist because we allowed them to exist. There are so many areas in the greater Washington, D.C. area that are equidistant D.C. to Baltimore, whether it's Montgomery County, Maryland, or Annapolis, so many places like that where kids grew up wearing Cal Ripken jerseys, and then you suddenly see them wearing Bryce Harper jerseys.
Yeah.
And you sort of understand, like, okay, I can see why the Orioles might want to have a little bit of compensation for that. But eventually it just, the Nationals missed out on an awful lot of revenue, constantly in court, battling this thing. For all those reasons, for all those various ensnarements are gone, will be gone after this year, which is great for them. Bad news is they, the state of the cable TV industry, and the state of just revenue generation on TV, nonetheless. And again, it's such a paradox because live sports continues to be the greatest value in almost any entertainment realm, but certainly within linear TV, over the top. It's unpredictable, it's unscripted. Fans are passionate for all those reasons. It's very lucrative, but the model is busted up. And if the Nationals if this was 2013, 2014, the Nationals might be looking at $1 billion TV contract. And in this, it's like trying to put pieces of a pie together and come up with a lucrative enough package that includes cable, that includes direct to consumer, streaming, all that kind of stuff. So it's it can be done, but it's just not easy. But the bigger thing, I think, too, is the Lerner family, the owners. Do they really want the team or not? Did they really want to sell the team a couple years ago? And certainly the Masson debacle was an immediate hurdle in any sales plans, because a prospective buyer might be like, well, what am I really buying here? I need some resolution with this, this thing with the Orioles. And well, that's gone now. So, there's no excuse for the Lerners to not spend money going forward. And there's no excuse for them to sell the team if they want to, because it's like, okay, you know what you're buying now. And conveniently enough, Ted Leonsis, the Capitals Wizards owner, he also runs a sports network that broadcasts the Capitals and Wizards that needs summertime inventory. So, it's who knows if he has the enough scratch left to for the $2 billion to buy the Nationals and build out further his broadcast empire. But at the very least, because as we've seen, the Nationals have really sat out the free agent thing, and they can kind of make the excuse that this wasn't quite the time this winter. I kind of liked Bregman to them as a longer term investment. Like, okay, they need a third baseman. He would dovetail well with the young players coming up, but now they're still in a mode of let's just wait. Let's wait for the young guys to pop. Let's see what we need.
Kind of like with the whole, kind of like when Jason Worth signed with the
exactly the precursor signing. So it's I think it's I don't think it would have been too early to get a guy like that this year. Next year will be the real tell. Will they start spending money when the last of those prospects are ready to roll and the product needs to be augmented? But at the very least, they are free after this year, and that's really big, and that should allow them to do what they actually want, whatever that may be.
Well, Gabe, thank you so much for this great interview. Thank you for being our first guest on the Deferrals podcast. We truly
absolutely an honor.
Appreciate it. Is there anything else you would like to add before we end the interview?
That's about it. Don't stare at spring training stats. We still got 3 weeks left.
But Taijuan Walker's throwing 94, Gabe. Taijuan Walker is throwing 94.
Oh man! Soon enough, there will be real baseball. So enjoy the spring for what it is. Dream on what you want to dream on, but keep grounded in reality. That's what I say.
Well, thank you so much, Gabe, and for everybody that's watching. Please catch Gabe's work on usatoday.com. And we'll also post your social media links in our descriptions below. So please, everybody, give Gabe a follow. Thank you once again, Gabe. And once again, big thanks to Gabe Lacques from USA Today, MLB reporter, for joining us on the deferrals and being our very first guest. We really appreciate it. Now, we got a couple more things to get to on this latest edition of the deferrals. Matt, we want to talk a little bit about Pete Rose, huh?
Yeah, Pete Rose came up in the news recently this week, and, we learned over the weekend that Rob Manfred is considering taking him off the ineligible list, which would make him eligible to go back into the Baseball Hall of Fame. And that creates the debate. Should Pete Rose be in the Baseball Hall of Fame? I'll start with you, sir.
That's a big hell no for me. It's funny. Like, I was growing up, I was a big proponent. I'm 44 years old now. I'll be 45 next year. I was, I guess, around like 9 years old when Pete Rose was banned from baseball for life. Obviously, being a Phillies fan, he helped win the Phillies their very first World Series championship in 1980. So that meant a great deal to us in the Philadelphia Phillies fan base. And, when you initially saw and read what Pete did, yeah, it was bad. But then you guys like, oh, he was only betting on his own team. He was only betting on his own team to win. It wasn't like he was throwing any of the games, anything like that. And baseball tried to give him a lifeline many times, and he just shot himself in the foot over and over and over again. And even Fox gave him a lifeline too. He was an analyst for Fox's MLB coverage, along with A-Rod. So that made an interesting studio panel there, having Alex Rodriguez and Pete Rose on the same desk. But what really turned me into a very hard no was when Pete essentially admitted to statutory rape. He admitted to a sexual relationship with an underage girl in the 1970s while he was married. And for me, yeah, that's despicable. That's heinous. That's horrendous. And, you got to draw a line somewhere. And that's where my line was drawn. He does not belong in the hall for that. He does not deserve a plaque alongside players like Hank Aaron and Willie Mays and Jackie Robinson for all the crap they had to endure and struggle with just for being black. He does not deserve to have a plaque next to those gentlemen. And on top of that, if you really look into, I believe it was the Dowd report that came out on Pete Rose's gambling. Yes, he only bet on the Cincinnati Reds to win while he was a manager. But what I think might get overlooked is that there were games he didn't bet on the Reds to win. And the reason why he didn't bet on the Reds those games was because there were certain pitchers who were taking the mound that day that he did not have confidence in. And in the Dowd report, you kind of saw that over and over again, that there were certain pitchers who were on the mound, he wouldn't place a bet on the Reds. So you're telling me one thing about, yeah, he only picked the Reds to win, but why wasn't he picking the Reds to win when these couple other pitchers were on the mound? So I think that kind of gets swept under the rug a little bit. It should be more in the forefront, but yeah. So no for me. big no for me. Pete Rose going into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, with Rose, you mentioned again for talk specifically about the Baseball Hall of Fame. There are plenty of people, for people who are proponents of Rose being put in, that will say, "Oh, there's plenty of other guys who have terrible things in their history." Okay, I will acknowledge that. If we want to put that aside for now, let's put that aside. Now, let me take you to the MLB rulebook, Rule 21D. Any player, umpire, or club or league official or employee who shall bet any sum whatsoever upon any baseball game in connection with which the bettor has a duty to perform shall be declared permanently ineligible. Pete Rose did that.
Yep.
By definition, by MLB rulebook, he should be permanently ineligible. Now, there have been accusations that he also bet on games as a player, but he's denied those. So let's take him at his word in that instance and say he didn't bet when he was a player. Okay, but he bet when he was a manager. He's confirmed that. He said he did it. One, we have the whole angle of, well, it's different for baseball, but the equivalent of insider trading. He had, as you mentioned it, he knew with specific pitchers, I don't want to bet on this guy. He had insider knowledge that the public or other people did not have access to. That is an unfair balance of system. That is something you cannot have. And why is that important today? Because you look at what MLB is doing. It has partnerships with BetMGM. You can bet on FanDuel. You can bet on DraftKings. You can do so many things. And what is critical to those companies is integrity. Integrity, because they can't have fans believing these games are fixed. They can't have fans believing, all this is going on, that it's not real, it's fake, it's being staged. They're not bet, because if that happens, DraftKings, they lose those people who are betting on those games. They lose, and they obviously want that money. So that for baseball, if that's a lost source of revenue, you can't have that. That's the financial aspect. And why is that so important? Because we've seen how they've implemented it already. In 2024, we had multiple instances of suspension. Umpire Pat Holberg was fired by Major League Baseball. Was he betting on games? No, but Major League Baseball found out there were sports gambling accounts, and he was sharing information with people he knew. Specifically, his friends bet 141 times on baseball from 2021 through 2023. Again, the equivalent of baseball's insider trading with gambling, he had to be getting rid of. That was the right call. In that same year, former player Tusvita Marcano was banned for life after it was found he was betting on games, including those involving his former team. In that same year, Jay Groom, Jose Rodriguez, Andrew Salfrank, Michael Kelly received 1-year bans for betting on games they did not play in. In each of those instances, Major League Baseball has set a tone. If you bet on games you're involved in, it doesn't matter what your involvement is. If you're an umpire, if you're a player, or your manager, you are banned for life. You will not take part in this sport ever again, even if you're betting on games you're not involved in, because, again, you have that inside information. You are going to face a serious penalty, and realistically, most of these guys probably aren't going to play baseball again because it's been tainted. You can't really trust them. And again, betting on baseball, that exposes those players to risk where, hey, bookies or, shady operations that say, we already know you're involved in this, so do this for us. That exposes Major League Baseball to liability. That exposes teams to liability. Bringing this all back to Pete Rose, you cannot have that if you are Major League Baseball. I don't care about the optics of, it's been so long. No, you have a product. Your product is about protecting your financial investments. Your product is about protecting your integrity. In bringing Pete Rose back into Hall of Fame, letting him posthumously have that honor, you cannot have that whatsoever. And that is putting aside all the other things that we could talk about with him that really aren't discussed nearly as much as they should be, but just purely on the baseball element, on MLB's rulebook, on the integrity of the game, Pete Rose should not be in the Hall of Fame.
100% agree, and I'm just going to add one more point in there. MLB or Baseball Hall of Fame voters, we're all big on the morality clause when guys like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa were on the ballot. There's no way in hell Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame ahead of Barry Bonds. I'll just say that. If you're going to leave Barry Bonds off from the morality clause, when, one, he never tested positive. Never tested positive. was never suspended for testing positive. Did his head grow like 5 sizes? Yes. We know that. But if you're going to use that morality clause to keep Bonds out of the Hall of Fame, you sure as hell better use it to keep Pete Rose out as well.
Yeah.
And that's our take. Now, to move on to something more fun to close out the show with, we are going to try our hand again at Immaculate Grid.
We promise we're going to do better this time. It's baseball reference. We spent the time. We're going to do better. It's going to go well. I promise you.
Okay, so for the people who cannot see the grid and who might be listening to on a podcast, the grid is set up with we got boxes for St. Louis Cardinals, Cardinals Tampa Bay Rays, Cardinals LA Dodgers, Rangers Cleveland Guardians, Rangers Tampa Bay Rays, Rangers LA Dodgers, All-Star Cleveland Guardians, All-Star Tampa Bay Rays, All-Star LA Dodgers. Now, I am going to start the timer. And you can see MJ, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
Times now. This is going to be fun.
Let's go. All right. What are we starting with?
We're going to go Dodgers All-Star. We're going to go a little bit of a curveball with Tyler Anderson.
Tyler Anderson. Wow, look at that. 0.1%. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go Guardians All-Star. Let's see. Ooh, Eddie Murray, right?
Yeah.
No! Oh
my goodness.
Oh, no. All right, I'm doing Sandy Alomar.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would just, as we get this wrong, I would just like to mark that I am batting 1,000 today.
Oh,
my good friend Higgins is batting 7,000.
Okay, Rays All-Star. Rays All-Star. What are we doing?
Yeah, I think I'm feeling a little Kazmir.
A little Scott Kazmir. All right, 3%. All right, let's go. What do we move on to next?
Let's go with. I'll let you pick.
Oh boy! Oh, you're putting me on the spot, huh? Let's do.
Oh, you know what? I'll do. Yeah, you take that. You take the Rays and the Rangers.
Okay. Hopefully, this is not a big one. Damn it, 25%.
All right, Guardians and the Rangers. I will take Corey Kluber.
Corey Kluber. All right. It's a shame what happened to him. 10%. Okay. Let's do. All right. Dodgers Rangers. Dodgers Rangers. Oh, I am so bad at this right now.
I mean, there's an easy one we can take, which is Yu Darvish, but
we're not doing that. We could also do Max Scherzer as well.
Yeah.
Oh, damn it. Did Charlie Huff pitch for both?
Not sure.
Should we try Charlie?
Just remember this will lower your batting average and not mine.
Oh.
It's a hit.
Suck on that, MJ. All right, we got 2 more. All right, your turn, MJ.
Let's go. You know what? I'm gonna take a layup here with the Guardians and the Cardinals with Andrew Miller.
Ooh, 21%. 21%.
Oof. At least I'm batting 1,000.
All right, fine. You know what? I'll do an easy one too. Randy Arozarena. 33. No, damn it. All right, stop.
We might have done worse than we did last time.
How was Eddie Murray not an all-star with the Cleveland Guardians?
We have to see now how far off you were on this. Just let's see. All right, 1994 to 96, and he made the All-Stars from 78, 81 to 86, and 91. So you're about a decade off, my good sir.
Terrible.
It's terrible. And it's terrible.
Terrible. Oh, man. Well, now my computer is just absolutely freezing. So I can't stop anything.
We are the Phillies lineup in October. It's everything's going wrong.
Oh, this is terrible. All right, let's just end this now before something worse happens. Well, everybody, this was the deferrals. Thank you for joining. Please see us next time. And as the kids say, smash those like, subscribe, and notification buttons. Say goodbye, Matt.
Goodbye. We will see you again, and I promise I will do better on Immaculate next time.
Whatever. Bye, everybody.